everyone, we are getting some more information there out of Annapolis, Maryland. We actually heard that this is a deadly newsroom shooting and there are multiple fatalities involved. So again, this is Westfield Annapolis Mall in Maryland, and Fox News is reporting that there are multiple fatalities. County police are leading the investigation into the shooting. It's currently 3:19 p.m. out there in Annapolis, Maryland, and you see employees in that building there coming up with their hands up. This is a breaking news situation. We are hearing that multiple people were shot at Capital Gazette newspaper, moved into their current headquarters. I'm trying to get some more information for you all here. But again, this is being considered a deadly shooting at a newsroom in Annapolis, Maryland. I believe we do have two live pictures I can bring you here right now, show you the scene. They both look like they're very close to the same building, if not the same building. Here you go, our two different perspectives that we have. The sheriff is saying that the suspect has been apprehended. But again, multiple people shot at Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland. No longer considering it an active shooter situation, but we are hearing that multiple people are dead as a result of what happened here. Everyone, Ron Hoon will be joining me any moment now to talk about this breaking news situation. All right, everybody, I'm currently joined by our very own Ron Hoon. And Ron, this is a breaking news situation out of Annapolis, Maryland. Have you heard anything?
We believe that the suspect, and hopefully the only suspect, according to the sheriff's office, has been apprehended. It was a sheriff's deputy. This is an interesting situation because you have obviously multiple agencies. You have the local police, you have the county sheriff that operates in this area. This, again, is Annapolis, Maryland. And I'm just now being told that ATF is also responding to the scene. So you have those three different agencies, and from what we heard, it was a sheriff's deputy who somehow was able to apprehend the gunman in this case. So this, as you mentioned earlier, is happening near a busy kind of a shopping mall area there in the Annapolis region, and this is a newspaper, the Capital. Everybody who's back that way knows about it. They call it simply the Capital. Its official name is the Capital Gazette, and it's one of the oldest newspapers in the United States. In fact, it dates all the way back to the early 1700s. Wow. Just incredible to think that this particular publication and their sister publications have printed for over 250 years in various locations. And this is a new location. As you know, in the newspaper business, there's been some downsizing. We don't know if that's the exact reason why, but they moved to a different facility there in Annapolis just 2 years ago. And so what would have prompted someone to come in, and you would probably have to presume get past security. Most major organizations are going to have some level of security. And what it was that prompted this person to walk in there and start shooting, we just don't know. But it does appear that A, we have multiple fatalities, we just don't have any kind of a number that we can pass along, and B, the gunman's in custody.
Yeah. It looks like the Baltimore Sun owns the paper and says that they were alerted by a reporter. And yeah, as you said, ATF is there. Other details, very, very fluid, breaking news situation. We actually have 2 different live pictures up there. I'm going to try to show both at the same time here.
Okay, good.
There you go. You see employees still being escorted out of the building. You can imagine, we were talking about downsizing. That whole building is not the newspaper.
Right, sure. Yeah, sizable facility there, and this is, you know, we did see moments ago, just bring me up to speed, were you able to show your viewers some of the pictures of people walking with their hands up and out of the parking lot? So that generally is an indication that they are quickly clearing the scene. We've seen those helicopters. I know you've been showing some of those pictures. So we've had the flights that are getting people out of there and to a level 1 trauma center just as quickly as possible. It's in Maryland, but it's basically about as close to Washington, D.C. As it is to Baltimore itself. Interestingly, this newspaper is actually owned by the Baltimore Sun, the primary newspaper certainly in Maryland. So they have this other newspaper, the Gazette, called the Maryland Gazette. So you have the Capital Gazette, the Maryland Gazette, which is published a couple of times a week. And basically the southern boundary for home delivery of the Gazette starts in a suburb of Annapolis, and then for Annapolis itself. You know, that is a historic city. It's on my list of cities to go visit. I haven't been there yet, but it is the home, and has been for centuries, the home of the Naval Academy here in our country. And it is just a sad day there. When you hear multiple fatalities, you just don't know. I mean, Pilar, how many times have we been on situations like this where we're covering it for our viewers here on our streaming News Now service or right on Fox 10 television? Take a look there. They've actually widened out the helicopter. I'm not sure if they're...
One of them here, we have 2 different live pictures, everybody.
Okay,
One of them's leaving the scene, it looks like. The other one's still there above.
Yeah, right.
But Ron, I mean, we're taught in journalism school, as journalists, we have to be unbiased. We have to, you know.
Yeah, you've got to be able to cover both sides, all sides. Now, we don't always see that, particularly in the day and age that we live in, but I do believe over time, the viewers or the readers or the listeners are going to give credit to the organization that they think brings them the most truthful, unvarnished accounts, and I believe is the reputation this newspaper has after all these years in business.
But you hear of a shooting at any place of business where people are at work, and journalists in particular, it hits a little bit closer to home than I think.
Well, sure. I mean, you just don't know. Is this somebody that was motivated for some sort of political reason? Was it somebody who didn't like a particular story?
Former employee, perhaps?
Could it have been a disgruntled employee? Could it have been some sort of domestic dispute between a person and an employee there at the newspaper? These are all, you know, when law enforcement first responds, their first job is to secure the safety of the people who are inside and try to render aid to those who have been hit in the gunfire, and then to try to basically do all they can to capture whoever was responsible. Now, in a lot of these shooting situations over recent years, gunmen, because we've had so many of them, do try to escape.
Right.
and frequently at least are successful for a while. Others will take their own life if they're suicidal, and that's why they did something like this. But it is a little unusual to hear that already the gunman has been taken into custody. So when we first heard about this, and this was just moments before 12 noon, it was coming in as an active shooter situation.
Yeah.
So the fact that we can now report that people are exiting the building and that the suspect is in custody, it's very fluid, but as of right now, it looks like the one gunman has been arrested.
Right. Trying to see, because Fox 5 DC has been updating us. They just updated their web story. Shooting reported at Capitol Gazette in Annapolis. That's according to the ATF. Reported 2:35 p.m. local time. And is it Anne Arundel?
Anne Arundel. Mm-hmm.
Anne Arundel County Sheriff Ron Bateman telling Fox News multiple fatalities have been reported. So we're going to continue to follow it. When anything develops, we'll let people know. That helicopter on the right, what do you think that is? Is that ATF perhaps?
Yeah, we'd already seen the air evacuation helicopters come and go, unless they are now flying further out, trying to follow one of the helicopters that had been on the ground and in fact is heading out of the area. It's just so fluid right now. The situation is, you can't say hard to believe because we see so many of these anymore that it's just a sad commentary on where we are in the year 2018, that these types of things continue to happen, and apparently there's no way to stop them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see, and they get a lot of weather up in that part of the world there in June. You can see some of these afternoon storm clouds already starting to develop. It's 3:30 back there. This actually happened less than an hour ago. The first report came in at 2:35, so about 56 minutes ago. And no doubt we will hear something from law enforcement here relatively soon, as we've got one of our own here. You've got the journalism community, and we just don't know. Was somebody targeted because of something they wrote in a newspaper, or, as you said, could it have been some disgruntled former employee, or was it a situation where there was some domestic situation that led a gunman to this facility? It's multiple fatalities, and that's the sad part.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember, Pilar, working in this newsroom when the shooting at Virginia Tech happened.
Mm-hmm.
And when it first came in as multiple fatalities, and I believe the original report was a handful of people had been killed, and then when the actual number came in as more than 30, it was just shocking. Now, this was maybe a little bit more of an innocent time in our country, I think, well over 10 years ago now that the Virginia Tech shooting happened.
I was in college when it happened.
Okay, so when you see a number when you hear a number like that, it was just, the gasps here in our newsroom were audible. But we have seen the massacre in Las Vegas,
mm-hmm.
where more than 50 people were killed by a gunman who managed to shoot down upon country music lovers. We have seen the massacre that happened just this year, this early part of the year, at the school of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. So we just don't know what to expect. Multiple fatalities can mean a lot of different things.
Ron, what I'm thinking, if this was, aimed at somebody or multiple people in the newsroom, if it was relating to journalism or piece or report or column, mm-hmm.
The
last time I can remember when journalists were attacked is when those people were doing the live shot out on the East Coast.
Oh, yes, and that happened just outside of Roanoke, Virginia, mm-hmm. and that story was just horrible to have to follow, because here you had a young reporter and her photographer who were simply out there just doing a live report. Both of them in a clearly defenseless position because they're focused on the job at hand. the photographer taking the pictures and the reporter who she was live on the air at the time. It's just horrifying. So we don't know in this situation. Is it? It would be somewhat ironic if it did happen at a journalistic outlet, at a newspaper, and it didn't have any connection to that particular business and what they do, but we won't know. We just won't know until we get some sort of an update as to who the gunman was, or he is. Again, the gunman we believe is alive and in custody, and why it was that he or she took aim at people inside that building.
Another thing as well is that newspaper outlets are no longer just newspapers. They're not just something you either get in your mailbox or on your driveway. They're online, social media.
Right.
You know, they're everywhere now. It's not just print.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even sure why I did it, because everybody's out of the newsroom, but I almost immediately went to their website, the Capital Gazette website, and they're reporting on various things that are happening. The more local a newspaper is, or any type of news outlet, the more local they are, then probably less time spent covering all the big national stories. So who knows? Who knows if it was motivated by a local news story? Or was it motivated by something having to do with a national story, maybe the political environment that we're in? We really don't know. I can tell you this, Pilar, when attacks like this happen, I really do think it sends a chill through every newsroom in America, because the First Amendment is first and foremost what our nation is all about. The ability to have free speech and the freedom of the press and of the media is just so elemental to who we are as Americans, and they don't have that in a lot of other places in the world. Where the government controls the media. I do recall, this is interesting, the first time I had ever heard of an instance where journalism or a journalist was attacked, and that was when I was a college student back in the 70s, and it just happened to be here in Phoenix. And there was a newspaper reporter who was targeted in the parking lot of a local hotel here. His name was Don Bowles, and he had been writing some articles that apparently had upset enough people that he became a target. And here I am, a college kid just getting ready to get into this business, and I just couldn't believe that a man who was simply trying to get at the truth could be targeted by a bomb in a parking lot in Phoenix. I was up at the time living up in the Pacific Northwest. That's the first instance, and the murder of Don Bowles is something that every journalist, certainly here in Phoenix, knows about, and either remembers when it happened or have since learned about it in later years. And it's just horrifying. It's horrifying that someone was killed because he was simply trying to get to the truth and bring it to the public. So what happened in this case, we'll find out soon enough.
All right, Ron, thanks for joining us. We'll continue to follow this, everybody, here on News Now.